Hello and welcome back to the RAGS manual. We are talking about the Player tab tonight. What I'm going to do is continue on with our game from the previous two lessons of the tutorial. So if you remember previously we had designed 3 rooms, each with pictures. You know what? It looks like the western room has the same picture. Let's go ahead and set that to the waterfall. I don't think I did that. Maybe I did. Anyway, okay, so let's talk about the Player tab now and what you can do with the player itself. So you've got initially on the General tab here, you can see you can either prompt for player name at game start, or you can give the player a name. Most people would want to be prompted for a name so they can set their own name. So we'll go ahead and turn that on. Prompt for player gender at game start. That means if you want your player to be able to choose male, female, or possibly other, they can do that. Right now we'll just leave that as male for now. And what male, female, or other is really used for in the game is some kind of command replacement. So if you're writing descriptive text, such as in your initial description, you are a, and then if you want to, based on their gender, choose male, female, man, woman, whatever, you can insert that here. Now, most people don't memorize what these text replacement commands are, so I've provided a way for you to pull up a menu to insert your kind of special characters. In order to pull up that menu, you hold down on the Alt key and hit V. So there we go. When we hold down on Alt and hit V, we get the insert variable. It actually gives you more than just variables. It gives you some text replacements as well. And let's go through what's available right now. Now keep in mind we haven't added any variables to our game yet. These are all text replacements that you can access even before you get to variables. So exit.destID, exit.destName, exit.direction, and exit.active. Oops. These are all commands that I'll explain later in the advanced section, but it basically allows you to loop through each exit in a particular room, or you could actually loop through the rooms as you'll see below here, and then loop through each exit in each room. So it's pretty powerful stuff, but it's used primarily for looping. And exit.direction will just show you N, I believe, for north, S for south. The destination name, that'll be your room name, and the destination ID, if you remember from our previous example in the rooms, we mentioned each room has a unique ID. That's a way you can access that. So the exit destination ID is actually a room ID, and then the room name that exit's going to. And now we get into the rooms. These are also part of looping that I'll explain more in the advanced tutorial. But we'll talk about room ID and room name. And then you can also loop through your items. You can get an item ID and an item name, and a character name. So I'll talk about all those soon. But here are some of the variables I wanted to talk about. We have an a/an replacement. So if you don't necessarily know if you're going to have a word starting with a variable or a word starting with a consonant, you'll be able to use that, and it will appropriately put in a or an. Here we get into the gender effects that I was talking about. We have boy, girl. I believe it will say boy, girl, or other, or it, I think. I can't remember exactly. If you put that in. We also have male, female, man, woman. So let's go ahead and put in a man, woman. So you select your item and you click insert variable. So there you go. You're a man/woman. So that will actually display correctly. So let's go ahead and let them prompt so we can show you what will happen when you look at your description that way. We also can have weight carry restrictions. You can turn those on or off and specify a weight limit. And basically weight carry restrictions are enforced on your objects. If you assign a weight to the objects, your player can only carry so much before the RAGS player will say, hey, you can't carry anymore. The player starting room we briefly mentioned in the first tutorial. You can choose where the player will start in your game. Initial inventory, If you want your player to start with items in their inventory already, like say a basketball, you can drag the basketball and drop it over there. So when you do that, if everything's working right, if you remember we dropped this basketball into a room earlier, it should have removed that. Let's go ahead and see if it actually did that or not. If we go here, you'll see the basketball is no longer in the room, it's now in your player's inventory. Now if we drag it back here and drop it, it should have left the player's inventory, and it did. So rags should keep track of where the objects are so you don't have duplicate objects. Okay, so we went over the description briefly. You'll type this description. Now it's important to note, if you type in a description for your player, that description will never show. It won't show because, by default, if you look at the actions, there's no examine command. We're going to add one, so we'll leave that in here. So initial player portrait, and down here is your layered player portrait. There's the title. That's strange. Well, anyway, it looks like there's a little problem there, but we'll have to fix that. I'll log a report. So anyway, let's go ahead and import another picture for the player portrait. Let's take a look here. What do we have? Sample pictures. Any sort of guy. How about a toucan? Okay, so your player, you can drag and drop, and there you go. You're a toucan now. So that's your player portrait. If you put in a layered portrait, if you remember, it's going to override this portrait so they'll only see the sea turtle because it's not a transparent image. So we're just going to leave it at none. So our initial player portrait will show through. So that's everything on the General tab. Let's go ahead and move on to the Custom Properties. Now if you remember, back on our Rooms tab, we defined two custom properties, Outside and Searched. In the player object, you can add your own custom properties here as well and access them in commands and conditions. We don't really need any at this point, so let's move on to the actions. Now the actions should be very familiar since we covered them kind of in depth in the Rooms tutorial. But let's go ahead and right click, and you'll see there's one default action called Examine. Now this Examine is actually different than the Room Examine. Let's go ahead and click it and see what it does. So what you see here, by default, rags will put in player display description. And that's all it will do. So it's not going to show any pictures, it's not going to do anything by default. Now one thing I'd like to point out here is you can actually customize and change the commands and default conditions that are available to you. Let's go ahead and delete the examine command. You can do this by right clicking and say delete action. What we're going to do, I'm going to show you how to modify which default actions are available for you and how to customize them as you see fit. I'm going to click on the tools. We'll do edit quick action commands. So let's go ahead and pull this up. Now what this will show you are all of the quick action commands that we've added. And we've got, if you'll see here, 4 examines. The reason why we have 4 examines is because we have different commands associated depending on which object you're modifying. So this is the examine for our rooms. If you click the View Edit button, you can see what that will do. And what it does, if you remember, say Room Display Description, and we use a special character here called Self. We say Room Display Picture Self. What Self will do is replace Self with the name of whatever room you're dealing with at the moment. So you can customize these, you can add conditions, whatever, and you click Finished when you're done. So let's go ahead and look at the examine for the player. This is it. We also have an examine for objects and characters. I'd like to point out, when you're creating a quick action command for objects, you have additional required object attributes that will get automatically set. So for example, take, drop, wear, remove. This is a special object command, and you need to set the carryable and wearable objects. So we'll get to that later. Let's go ahead and modify our player. So say for example, instead of just displaying the description, we'd also like to display the player portrait by default. Let's go ahead and right click. This is just like adding any other commands or conditions. we want okay, so what we're going to do is just add a different command here. Instead of room display picture, I think what we'll do is just display some text here. It says I'm additional examine text. What I really wanted to do was display the player's current portrait, but we're going to need a variable to do that, or modify the player custom property. So I think for now I'm just going to skip that and do something a little easier. So we'll go ahead and make that change, close that. Okay, so now if we right click in our player and we click the examine button, now you'll see that we have two commands in here. Additional examine text and display player description. This is an easy way to customize some commonly used commands that you'll need over and over again. Let's go ahead and set this back though. So I don't want that in there. So let's see, examine player, view, edit. Going to expand that and we'll get rid of this additional command and we'll be finished. Okay, so that's set. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover briefly on the player. Let's go ahead and run it real quick and see what we have now. If we debug, so you'll notice the first thing you see is enter your character's name. There we go. And then you can enter your gender. Let's go ahead and do that. Get rid of our debug window for now. So as you can see, we now have our toucan picture in the player portrait. There's a green bar around it indicating we have some active commands. Let's right click, examine. You are a man. Okay, so let's try it a different way. Let's go ahead and rerun this. Oops, hit the wrong command here. Let's go ahead. Okay, so we'll make up a girl's name. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, so now if we look at ourselves here, you are a woman. So that's how the gender can be used to affect your description. And hopefully this was helpful to you, and we'll move on to the objects next. See you soon. Bye.